it's probably not wise to overreact and say, oh, okay, well, because today we saw this giant tariff somewhere, we're going to instantly pay a lot of money to go move production out of there. It's probably better for you to say, okay, are they strong? Is my current supplier strong in that? Are we happy with them? You really evaluate where you are first, and then kind of see where the chips fall. So if you already have a supplier that's a trouble supplier, they provide you with poor quality, they're high cost, well, you probably should have moved anyways, but use it as an opportunity to then say, okay, well, I'm going to move these people now. But if you have somebody who's strong, I mean, sometimes expertise outweighs cost. And so you need to then drive cost in other areas.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Allied Advisors Podcast, the podcast for mid-market manufacturers looking to scale operations and improve that ever-important bottom line. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Mr. Drew Lawlor. Drew is the managing partner at Global Chain Consulting, a firm known for helping companies turn operational challenges into lasting advantages. Drew is a seasoned manufacturing and operations leader with over 15 years of experience, driving transformation across companies like Glowforge, BorgWarner, and Bosch. He's led high-stakes manufacturing launches, complex supply chain transfers, and cost reduction programs that have delivered results like 70% lower manufacturing cost and 10 times production output. Wow. What makes Drew stand out is his combination of hands-on operational expertise and strategic supply chain insights. He knows how to bridge the gap between the shop floor and the boardroom. Drew, great to have you here, man. So for those of you at home, Drew and I are great friends. We go back a long way, and I really am super fortunate. Obviously, you heard the introduction. I'm super fortunate to have Drew here with me today. Well, Drew, if you don't mind, maybe take a second and catch everybody else up on what you're working on now and what you're up to.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for the intro, Justin. Well written, I would say. Yeah, happy to be here and excited to talk to everybody today just about what I've been doing, what I'm seeing. I have the privilege, I would say, to talk to a lot of companies over the last few months. And in this ever-changing environment, it's really interesting for me to see how different companies are handling it. And I think that's what we're going to dive into today, is just a little bit about what I'm seeing, gaps that I'm seeing, areas that companies could exploit to help drive better costs in their supply chain, and just operational costs for their business. So, I was recently working at Glowforge, and then now I had the privilege of starting Global Chain Consulting with my previous boss, actually, from there, and my mentor. And together we really have been diving in company after company. It's amazing how many companies right now need help in their supply chain and operations, not just driving out cost, but just in the strategy. We see a lot of companies, they kind of set up their supply chain once, and then now they need to reevaluate it, and they don't know where to go. And so it's a really exciting time to be in this field. And I'm excited to share with you today, hopefully some tips and some areas that you could explore to help your business.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of tremendous upheaval right now, right? I mean, it just feels like, with this current administration, regardless of politics, it's definitely, in terms of tariffs and the impact these tariffs are having on U.S. manufacturers. I mean, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of unknown, which means obviously there's a lot of opportunities, right? So being able to take advantage of those opportunities is really what's going to set companies apart moving forward, being able to be smart about how they approach change, which, kind of brings me to my first question. We are at a time of just constant change, right? We come in here today and now there's a 30% tariff on, goods from Uzbekistan or something, right? Folks are trying to react to that in real time. How do you suggest, companies do that? I know we talked in the pre-meeting. You said you break those down into three categories, right? Folks that just want to wait and see what happens, folks that maybe overreact, react super aggressively, and then folks that are trying to take a more measured approach. I mean, which one of those do you think is better, or is there a time when one is better than the other?
Yeah, I think right now we don't know. Is probably the best answer. I would almost equate it to the internet era. Companies, when the internet first started, they jumped on board right away. They made everything online. The internet was the future. And then there were companies that They waited and see, hey, what's going to happen? And then there are companies that did a little bit of both, and some of it worked and some of it didn't work. And what I would see as probably the best way to de-risk your business is some sort of a blended model. There's a lot of value in diversification of your production across regions. Just in general, I think that you also need to look at what areas are getting stronger in your category. And so when you look at how the tariffs are constantly changing, it's probably not wise to overreact and say, oh, okay, well, because today we saw this giant tariff somewhere, we're going to instantly pay a lot of money to go move production out of there. It's probably better for you to say, okay, are they strong? Is my current supplier strong in that? Are we happy with them? Really evaluate where you are first, and then kind of see where the chips fall. So if you already have a supplier that's a trouble supplier, they provide you with poor quality, they're high cost, well, you probably should have moved anyways, but use it as an opportunity to then say, okay, well, I'm going to move these people now. But if you have somebody who's strong, I mean, sometimes expertise outweighs cost. And so you need to then drive cost in other areas. But I think that the blended model is what I'm seeing. And when I talk to companies, I've probably talked to 50 companies over the last 2 months. I'm seeing more people choose the blended model. I'm seeing companies probably throw away a lot of money, the aggressive reactors, who they just want to move fast. They want to move now. And while that might be good for my business, it's not necessarily good for them. And so I think that I've been doing a lot of coaching too, just around what's a good strategic plan here, because tariffs are going to change over time. Expertise is going to change over time. And just really taking a step back and evaluating what's best for me and my business, and where can I move or not move my supply chain to be the best that it possibly can.
Let me ask you this: do you think that dual sourcing is going to make a comeback? Right? I mean, having worked in manufacturing and having worked in supply chain groups that had to manage dual source components, it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult to figure out who gets what order. But do you think that's companies are going to be forced to try to figure that out just to be able to react quicker to tariffs?
Yeah, I think it's a strategy. It's definitely a risk reduction strategy. So I think if you have a component that you can't live without, that's a custom component, dual sourcing is a strategy that you should really consider, especially if it's a high tech, high process time. I think those are areas that will benefit your business, but you've got to do it right. And when I say you've got to do it right, you've really got to think about, is the quality the same? Am I doing this just for the tariff, or am I doing this because it's the right thing to do for my business? Because we are in this ever-changing environment, and maybe you see a region that's up and coming in your sector, and you want to get in it early and get some good partners in early. And now you've got a stable source, and maybe even a little bit higher risk source, but you could use them later. And so you can validate with them, you can do supplier development with them. And it's not a huge cost, but it helps de-risk your business, where if you did need to change and there was a 50% tariff and you just don't have the margins for that, then you can quickly adapt and change. I do think dual sourcing is going to come back, but I think it's going to come back for your complex custom components that you can't just easily do if you're getting ahead, right? These aren't the wait and see people. These are going to be the blended model people who strategically pick those components and dual source them.
Yeah, I had a conversation with another tariff expert during a previous podcast, and he was kind of giving similar advice. He's like, companies really need to be looking at their procurement teams to make sure that they're digging in and looking at different options and really modeling that out to figure out, to your point, if we switch, what impact is that going to have on not only cost, but on quality, right? On delivery performance, right? Do we really have a good handle on that so that we understand it? Because to your point, for a long time, companies have been able to set up supply chains and just, take a hands-off approach, but that is not the scenario we find ourselves in today, for sure.
Yeah, the set and forget is gone now.
Yeah, yeah, that's dead. But kind of focusing, still focusing on supply chain for maybe my entire life. China has really been the place where companies go to source components here in the U.S. But that seems to be changing, right? I'm talking to a lot of companies that are looking at India or Vietnam or Mexico or maybe Europe to try to find a viable source for their components. What are you seeing in terms of the new global footprint?
Yep. Yeah, I mean the China plus one strategy is very popular right now. But definitely India. I can't tell you how many companies I talk to there that India is their number one go-to right now. So if they're dual sourcing or resourcing, they're doing it from China to India. And I'm seeing it for a lot of like metal components, complex metal components or forgings, for example. They're
Mm-hmm.
all going to India. They have high quality, they have technical know-how, they have competitive costs, and right now they have tariff advantages. So it makes them pretty attractive for both the larger companies and the smaller companies. But you have to consider the trade-offs. So one of the things that I consistently also hear is culturally there is a need or willingness to please. And that can be a little bit dangerous because that can make it harder to surface the real problems. Whether it's production issues, they're falling behind. It could be quality issues. There's just not a lot of transparency sometimes. You might feel on the surface you're getting it, but reality is so much different. And so what I've seen work is to have a local, sourced by you or through another company, a local resource that you can trust that can go in, do spot checks, also speak the language. Even though a lot of their English is very, very good, some things still just get lost, and that's a natural issue that's going to happen no matter what country you go to. But having that local resource on site has seemed to be the make or break for people, and I wouldn't say just India, but just about everywhere right now. Because everybody's trying to cut costs. The companies who are in high tariff regions, they're also trying to cut costs. And so knowing that you've got somebody in your court on site who's sticking up for you and looking out for you seems to be one of the big benefactors in success for companies, not just going to India, but other places.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing, really with any new product launch, but there's been a lot with Indian suppliers. So, I've had a lot of opportunities to kind of look to see that is poor quality at startup, right? This new age of tariffs and these new, let's say quick responses of, hey, stop buying it from China and let's buy it from, India or somewhere else. We're not taking the time to make sure supplier quality is stabilized before we turn on production and start sourcing components. What are you seeing in that, and kind of what's your advice to suppliers before they take the leap to make sure that they're protected on that front?
Yeah. It's something I've seen and actually done is set up an out-of-house company to do all the measurements. So you've got to have a second source measurement lab. That is the best way to de-risk that at startup. And if you're dual sourcing, it's beautiful because you can take your current components, send them to India and say, I want to make sure that my current components match my new components. And because, there's always a little bit of difference in measuring technique, depending on how strong you are in metrology, you could measure the same feature in 4 different labs and get 4 different answers if you don't have good GD&T and your drawings aren't great. And let's be real, especially smaller companies struggle with that, right? That's usually something that the smaller companies struggle with because they got one supplier, they make it good, might not even be to print, but it's functionally works. And so
Right.
what I've seen and what I've done is take those, ship them over there, and allow this third-party metrology lab to do all the measurements. Now you know where you stand today, and now you know where your new supplier is able to meet, and maybe it involves a print change then. And so I think something that companies have to be mindful of is don't get anchored on your print. And I think that this is a never-ending discussion for a lot of companies, but don't get anchored on your print, get anchored on your function. And so this allows you to say, okay, I've got I've got parts that we know work. I've got my new parts. And the number one goal that you need to think about is I want to make sure that my customers see the same parts when you dual source. And so having that ability to have that third party lets you know for sure that your customers aren't seeing a different lot of parts if they buy something on Monday compared to Friday. That those essentially are transparent to them. But having that third party metrology lab verify your supplier is worth every penny you're going to pay them to do.
That is super smart. Like I've never, I mean, when you say it, I'm like, well, duh. I mean, of course that makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Why wouldn't you do that? But I've
Right.
never thought of it until you just said it. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've watched different companies buy things from a new supplier in another country, and then the first batch shows up and they can't use it. Right? It's basically all got to be scrapped. And then they find out, well, the supplier's already made, 500 just like this. So now they're stuck. So yeah, I could definitely see where having that third party lab locally to the supply base would definitely earn its whatever it costs.
And they have the skill. It's not a skill issue. So allowing them to do that also cuts out time. So what you just said is another big pitfall that I see where we wait. Yep, we get the report, everything looks good, and now I'm going to wait for these to ship. And likely you're not it's not air freight. So you might even wait a month to get these. And like you said, they're probably building in the meantime because they're trying to please. They're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to be a good supplier. And then you get them, you're like, oh my gosh, these don't work at all. So it cuts out possibly even a month out of your timeline. If you ship the parts over, you don't have to ship a ton, ship a handful just to start, right? Get that gut feel. And you can do it cheap, depending on the product, even if you air freight it. So you don't have to ship 5,000 components, you can ship 10, and let's just get started with that.
And really, regardless of what it costs, it's worth it, because I can't imagine it costs more than however many hundreds of bad parts and downtime and the freight cost of that poor quality on those first couple of deliveries. So yeah, that's great advice. I feel stupid for having never thought of it, to be quite honest. But that kind of brings us to my next question about, the hidden costs that companies are missing when they're ramping up these new suppliers. Costs like, the freight, quality, obviously, that we just spoke about, downtime, scrap. What is your suggestion to companies to make sure they're capturing these costs, or at least maybe they're capturing the baseline before they start with this, so that they know, what this new supplier, the impact that it's having?
Yeah. Yeah, I think something that's underestimated by a lot of companies is just how much cost they actually control. So there's usually, I would say, some complacency around ongoing costs, freight being one of them. Even what HTS codes you're using, right? Okay, this is what we've always used for imports, and so I've never really evaluated that or had an expert evaluate if I'm using the right HTS codes. And so I think having that evaluation of things like freight, scrap, warranty, rework, your whole logistics, right? So where are these parts going, or what 3PLs are they going to? Where are they located? Kind of actually doing a total cost evaluation is extremely important. And we've had companies reach out to us that say, hey, I want to dual source, or I want to move suppliers. I have too many suppliers in China. I want to diversify. And we're saying, well, what's the goal here? Well, the goal is to de-risk out of China. I'm like, okay, well, is there a secondary goal? Well, yeah, of course we want the parts cheaper. Well, have you done an analysis on your current parts and your current supply chain and looking at all of those areas? Yeah, we'll get to that, afterwards. Well, why afterwards? Why not do it in parallel? Because you might find out you can get enough cost out that you can leave some of those components in China, and then you need to take the other ones out. And so it helps you also prioritize what components when you're looking at dual sourcing, or just product moves. It helps you really decide where should I go, which product should I choose, because you might have really big products that are just over the FedEx large freight size, for example. But if we just modify the packaging a little bit, now that cuts our freight cost in half, and now I can absorb the tariff. I don't need to to spend the cost to move suppliers. Instead, I have this other component that's really small, and everything else is in check. This is an easier one to move. I'm going to spend less money moving than I am to just drive the cost out within the current supply chain. So I think I'm seeing a very interesting trend, because I used to think everybody's going after those. And I think if you were to ask companies, they'd say, oh yeah, we've got those under control. We might even have a cost reduction program. But what they're not doing is they're not reaching out to experts in those fields. And so I think that having an external network of experts can really help you in some of those areas. Come in and say, oh, well, for example, have you done any benchmarking? Well, this supplier had the best cost. Well, how long ago? 25 years ago. Like, okay, well, let's reevaluate and let's do, a should cost model, and let's really do some benchmarking across the supply chain. You might find out there's a quick win there. Another one that's getting very popular that we're seeing is game theory negotiations. So getting a lot of suppliers together and really using game theory to kind of put them against each other, and you'd be surprised how much cost you can drive out just by deploying game theory.
When you say game theory, you mean like reverse auctions?
Essentially, yep, yeah. So you bid them against each other. They may be able to come up with their own improvements in it, but you allow them to create their own future with each other, and then you find out who's on top. And that can be extremely valuable to a group. I'm not an expert in game theory. My partner is, but I've seen him at work, and I'm telling you, I've seen some amazing outcomes for companies who don't have high volume. And I think that's something that really surprised me. I've worked at really big OEMs, and of course, you've got some weight when you're doing hundreds of thousands of units a year in your supply base. And I think that I see a lot of challenges and struggles, and a lot of almost excuses of, well, I only do 250 a month, or I only do 250 a year. How could I possibly get a better price just by having the supply base come together and essentially bid against each other? And it's like, well, if it's set up right, you would be surprised the results that you can get.
That's interesting. One of the things, you're talking about doing a lot of data analysis. And to me, or what I've seen out in the market, is there's really two big roadblocks to that. Number one, these mid-market manufacturers don't typically have a lot of data. And the second thing is they don't have the resources responsible for gathering, collecting, and analyzing that data, right? I mean, I think of these resources typically as industrial engineers. Doesn't have to be, right? It could be somebody with a different background. But do you see that? I mean, is that something that you've experienced a lot of, or is that just me?
I think that there's ways around that. I don't know if this is my lead into AI, but I'm going to jump there anyway. There's a lot of big enterprise solutions to getting data, and you can pay a lot of money to get a lot of data, either from third parties or you download the software yourself and you integrate it into your business. That as we see the future of operations, we're going to start seeing that the big companies are going to fall behind because they're losing the agility of data collection, data analysis quickly, because they're stuck in their enterprise systems. And something that I've seen that's extremely powerful is using AI, low code, no code solutions to really improve your operations and improve your evaluation. And some good examples are even simple things like a lot of companies pay a lot of money for Minitab every year. Well, you can have AI write you a Python code to do all the same stuff Minitab does, and you're just paying your same subscription fee. So you can drop Minitab, you can do gauge R&Rs, you can have it transform your data. I mean, you still got to check it. There's no doubt about that. But if it's writing Python code and you're running the code, you're usually have a lot higher success. I wouldn't just put my data in and into ChatGPT or Gemini and say, do a gauge R&R. But you could have it write the code to do the gauge R&R, and that's going to be very accurate. So I'm seeing that you can use these low code, no code solutions even for things like troubleshooting equipment. So maybe your troubleshooting guide is this thick. Well, now your training is going to take 3 months, 6 months. But you want operators to be able to walk in, or technicians to be able to walk in and say, I have this problem, what do I do? And it drastically decreases the training time. Now, you still need the technical know-how. You can't get around that. But what it does do is it allows you to follow the prompts all the way to the solution. And if you've got it set up right, you can even have it self-learn that, yep, this solution worked. And now it's going to update its own database to say, yep, that solution worked. Now I'm going to move it up in the percentages of what's most likely to work and what most likely isn't going to work. And so that's on the micro level, but you can use this on a much larger level as well, just by taking data that's out there for free and using it to do data analytics on it. And so Power BI, Tableau, all of those things that we're so used to using, I think will likely start going away. And especially for Tableau, the technology or the knowledge to enter into Tableau to get valuable reports can be quite high. And you usually have a guy doing it. But smaller companies, it's the same guy who's doing manufacturing engineering, who's doing quality, who's also trying to figure out, warranty costs and where warranty's driving higher costs. Well, you can use AI to do that for you now. And I think that having that agility and that speed is going to outpace some of the larger companies when it comes to data analytics. And when you're on the floor, for example, just going back to that, you can have cameras set up and do some pretty crazy stuff. You can have it watch the operators and see how many times they open their book. So maybe they have a training book or a standardized workbook, and you can say, okay, well, I thought this was a well-trained operator, and when he gets to station 10, he takes the book and opens it every time. Now you don't need that person standing on the floor necessarily to get that report every week. And now you can use it as an improvement tool. You can say, okay, well, Jeff Smith, he needs help on station 10. Let's do two things. One, let's revisit our training methods on station 10. Two, let's get him retrained and understand what his struggles are. Those can be extremely valuable. You don't need an industrial engineer out there or a shift supervisor to have to catch that kind of stuff. You can use other tools now to do that.
Yeah, I was just sitting here trying to wrap my head around what you were saying about basically uploading your troubleshooting guidelines into AI and then having AI kind of walk you through how to troubleshoot issues, right? So that you don't have to have a master mechanic doing that. You could really take somebody who's a lower skilled, and they could get to the same conclusion as long as they're supplemented or augmented by AI. That's extremely fascinating.
Yeah, so I've seen that be extremely successful. This isn't something I read in an article and I'm sharing with you. That's something we did myself on my own team, and seeing that reduce the training time. So you still have to have a couple technicians that are really strong that you can go to, but when you're trying to rapidly grow, and so let's say you're onshoring, and I do want to get into that before we get off here, but let's say you're onshoring, you've got a couple really strong people, but now you need to go from 2 people to 20 people. And eventually you need them all to be top level troubleshooters. Well, you can use this, and this is what we did, to get them, when they get to the final test step and it fails, they can go right over, they scan the barcode on the unit, they scan their operator code, right? So it writes all that stuff out, and then they tell it what the symptom is. And then it walks them through the troubleshooting guide. And it's so powerful because you don't need to escalate. You don't need to pull another resource. It's kind of a form of hands-on training. And it gets them to a point where then the expert can come in and go, okay, well, I know you followed all the steps. Like, they don't have to ask, well, what did you do? They already know they did all the basics and that didn't solve it. And so it can really increase your speed of training, especially for technical resources.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's game changing, right? Because how many times have I sat there and looked at a machine down and everybody standing around scratching their head wondering what to try next? Like, to have AI be able to augment that and supply that. Yeah, that's incredible. That's something else I hadn't thought about, but of course now that you say it, I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, in full transparency, I didn't think of it either, but the guy who did, I was very impressed when he had the solution. And he was no AI engineer. He's not a coder, but in a day or two, he had the solution up and running. It really worked. It was impressive.
I think you brought up a good point there, though, that AI is, you can't do without the experts. You still need to have the experts. AI is just meant to kind of augment those experts and make them more effective quicker, right? I think that's a mistake some people are making, is like, oh, I don't need an expert for this. I'll just use AI. And AI is just not to that level quite yet.
Not yet. We'll see it, I think, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think you're right, but it's not there quite yet. So, you mentioned onshoring a minute ago. Are you helping any of your clients, with that type of project, bringing things from, let's say, Mexico into the States? I mean, are you seeing a lot of that on the market?
We're seeing some of it. We did do that somewhat recently, and I think that people will say, "I can't believe you moved something from Mexico to the U.S." The tariffs aren't as bad as they are other places. Labor cost has been traditionally low. There's a lot of pros to building in Mexico. And the project that we did, we saw an amazing cost reduction. One of the things that we noticed is that there was a lot of overhead in Mexico, so they continually added overhead at the contract manufacturer. And so that can inflate your costs kind of in a, I don't want to say a sneaky way, but that's a way that can really drive up your costs. But I think that a lot of companies are hesitant to move from Mexico to the U.S. And you look at all the negatives of the U.S. and and they're there, right? I mean, we struggle. Every person I talk to who has a big facility or a small facility in the U.S., you struggle to find enough people who want to come to work every day and who really add value day over day, that don't miss lots of days of work, for example. Hiring is a real problem. I think that's well known. But one of the key differentiators that we did, and that I think that companies need to consider, is you don't need to run the same model. And what I mean by that is, just because the line in Mexico had 30 operators on it does not mean you need a line in the US with 30 operators on it. You can possibly, and what we did, which really worked, is we took a line with 20 or 30 operators on a shift, and we took it down to 10 to 12 technicians. So you end up going up in labor class, and you end up adding more work content to them than what was in Mexico. So obviously one technician is now, doing their zone, or possibly even starting at the beginning and taking one unit start to end. And of course, it depends on what your model is. This was an assembly operation that I'm talking about. And I think there's a lot of hesitancy in assembly operations, because usually in Mexico, they're high labor content. And so our initial thought is, well, I can't afford, our P&L can't afford that in the US. Well, you can change that. You can find low cost locations. So think about the Rust Belt in the US, right? I mean, there's a lot of open manufacturing space. There's a lot of great areas in the US that I think are overlooked, right? We think about what's in our backyard, but there's a lot of really cheap manufacturing space out there right now. And I think I would encourage companies to consider, if you're thinking about this, that space will likely dry up at some point. So those companies, those big real estate companies who've been holding these empty buildings for a long time, once they start to get some attention, they're probably going to increase their rates. And so it's really important to think about, strategically, do I want to get in early? Do I want to buy my building? Do I want to lease it? What does that look like? But at least you should consider that there are some cheaper areas to do it. Even if it's a not cheap area, you can consider changing the model. And I think that was the big mind shift for me, was I always thought, like, we're going to move it, we're going to pick it up, and we're going to set it down, and it's going to look the same. Well, that's where I would encourage you to think about, I wouldn't do that at all. I would pick it up and move it and use it as an opportunity to reevaluate. And if you don't have the expertise, go buy the expertise, right? There's people out there that do that, and really evaluate what's best for me, what's important. For the project that we did, there's some semi-automated equipment, there's a lot of manual equipment, and there's a couple automated pieces of equipment. Well, you can pool your equipment, you can have it all on a line. There's, depending on what your model is, you can change it. But what we found was, going up to technicians, you got a lot higher quality. They were able to do more work content, and they were able to almost match the output of the higher operator model that was in Mexico. And if you would have said, is that possible before, even with all, I mean, we had all the cycle times, we knew what the work content was, I would have said, there's no way. There's no way that this is going to work. And then we find out that it does work. And so what you see is that the work content that it might have taken an operator in Mexico, I'm just using Mexico as an example because of the project that we did, it might take them 10 minutes to do, and might take a technician in the US 3 minutes to do. Also because they're thinking while they're doing it, hey, this isn't the right tool. Hey, I could use a small fixture here. And because they're technicians and not operators, they come up with what they need. They don't just say, oh, this doesn't work, right? These are a group of highly skilled technicians that are looking to do what's best for them. And they're constantly making continuous improvements. And so you end up with a team of really engaged individuals that can take you up to your previous volumes. I mean, I don't want to guarantee it, but they can take you up to almost your previous volumes in Mexico with half or less of the staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're really talking about, incentive structures, right? I mean, when labor is not expensive or less expensive, you're incentivized for every problem. The answer is more labor, right? When that's not the case, then you got to get creative. You have to find other solutions that allow you to still be competitive. So yeah, I can definitely see where it could, given the right circumstances, make sense to move things from Mexico to US. Now, I would imagine there's a lot of planning that has to go into that, right? I mean, you can't just, say, hey, I'm gonna move it from Mexico to the US, and it's definitely going to be as cheap or cheaper than it is today. I mean, you're going to have to really dig into that to make sure that it works for you.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that too as part of the hesitancy that especially the small to medium sized companies, they don't have the resources. And that's why I think we're seeing an increase in the fractional model, right? Where you hire a consulting company or an agency to get part of an expert for a long period of time, and that helps you better reduce your risk in that move, but also do it in the right way. And so I think that that's what we're seeing, is that a lot of companies are hesitant because they're like, I don't have the people, and I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to hire 2 people to run this project. I'd rather just move it from one place to another, when in reality that might not get you. They'd rather move it from Thailand to Mexico or something, right? Or Malaysia to Mexico. That might not be actually the right decision. The right decision might be to move it to the US and change your manufacturing methods. And there's a lot of hesitancy when you don't know how to do that. And so
Right.
One of the things that I'm seeing in my conversations is that's a constant question that I get asked is this something that you guys can do? Because we're interested in it. We don't even know how to evaluate it. But we know there's possibly an opportunity out there. Or I'm seeing that they don't even bring it up. And I might ask the question, well, what have you thought about? Strategically, what have you thought about? They're not even considering the US, because to them, it's just too expensive. They're looking to reduce costs from the tariffs, from freight. And so I'm seeing a lot of more like, well, if we could get it into Mexico, at least get it in NAFTA, right? At least get it in Mexico, Canada, and the US, like at least get it close enough. But they're not even considering the US. And I think that's a big mistake that I'm seeing. I think the resources are out there that can really help them get over that bridge and kind of take them into the next phase of their business.
And I like what you were talking about with the AI too. I wonder, so I see it in my consulting practice as well, is a lot of the mid-market manufacturers, to your point, they don't have the resources that the big guys do. So they're hesitant to invest in automation, right? Because it's a lot of money. They don't really have the resources to implement it well. I wonder how AI might be able to bridge that gap a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how that grows in the next 3 to 5 years, or maybe even not that long, maybe 1 to 2 years at the rate AI.
Yeah, I would think that at least initially, companies should be looking at, how do I use AI to free up my current resources time? Because a lot of this stuff, I mean, it's not rocket science, right? I don't want to scare you like, oh, I don't have the resources, I can't do it. You might be able to do it. You might have the know-how, the problem-solving skills, but you might not have the time. And maybe that's the real root cause of the issue. Well, then start using some of these low-code, no-code solutions hey, I don't need to have a quality engineer spend half their day on the floor helping with troubleshooting if I implement a troubleshooting AI app. So now I've freed up my quality engineer's time. Now my quality engineer can take some of me, the manager's time. Now the manager can go spend time doing strategic evaluations on, can we move production into our current facility that's currently in Malaysia, for example. So, I think that we've got to think 2 or 3 steps ahead when we look at AI right now on how do I free up my current resources that will maybe give us the time to be able to manage some of these projects, or to evaluate that, hey, we really don't have the know-how. I've got to go outside and get it. But I think that we're kind of stuck. Some companies are really stuck. They're not using AI. They're not freeing up their time, and they're not able to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how companies are able to augment their workforce using AI in the future, and then what additional benefits they get out of that. I also love what you said earlier about the HR issues. We haven't ever spoken to anyone from HR on this podcast, but I think we definitely should, because it is to your point, it is a huge problem for all manufacturers, large, small, medium-sized, figuring out how to staff and employee retention. So that's definitely a problem out there that is probably worth diving into. Well, Drew, man, I really appreciate you carving out the time and coming to speak with us. I know you're a super busy guy. Is there anything else that maybe we didn't cover that you're like, hey, Justin, I can't leave you without talking about this?
I think one of the biggest things that we didn't cover explicitly, but we talked about a little bit, is just don't be scared to be creative. Right? To try something new, whether that's in AI, whether that's in manufacturing methods. The companies I see that are the small to mid-sized companies that I see are doing really well is they're not scared to be creative and try something new. So, I think I want to leave you with that, is that reevaluate what you're doing, decide where you could be creative, and listen to everybody, because somebody in your business probably has a good idea that you could use and move your business forward.
Yeah, I say that all the time. If the company knew what the company knows, there'd really be no limit to how far we could go, right? If we could pull all the knowledge that's here in this facility, in this organization, we could get a lot further. That's a roadblock. A lot of folks aren't good at utilizing the experience and the skill set that they have underneath their roof to solve problems and drive improvements.
Absolutely.
So, well, yeah, man, I appreciate the time. Looking forward to staying in contact and continuing to follow you guys and your growth in in the new consulting adventure. So stay in touch, and maybe we'll have you back on in the next year or two to see kind of where all these tariffs shake out.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Take care. Hey, for those of you, if you enjoyed this episode, please do like and subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. We want to reach more mid-market manufacturers, share knowledge, and help others grow. And we can only do that if you help us by sharing and promoting the podcast. So really appreciate it. All right. Till next time.